Hey, what's up, Sonic Academy? Welcome to my course on how to use Ableton Live's Beat Repeat audio effect. This is an effect that's been in Ableton Live for quite some time, and odds are if you've been using Live for a while, maybe you've stumbled across it or attempted to use it on some of your projects. I know it can be a little tough to wrap your head around at first and really get it to sound good in a lot of contexts. So my goal with this tutorial was to really get in there and break down every single control so that you can really start to grasp what's going on with it. And then we'll look at some practical uses of how you can use it creatively to create drum fills and flams, or even get a little outside the box and kind of create more textural ambient type stuff. So I'm hoping that with this course it'll kind of demystify some of the mystery around Ableton Live's Beat Repeat and hopefully encourage you to dive in and use it, because it really is one of the most powerful audio effects that comes with the software. So looking forward to sharing this with you all. Let's get right into it. Hey everyone, welcome to how to use Beat Repeat in Ableton Live. Beat Repeat, as I mentioned in the intro video, it's one of those effects that it's been in Live for quite some time. I started using Live around version 6, and as I recall, it was in version 6. It might have come in version 7. I don't remember exactly, but I know it's been here for a long time. It's one of those things you've probably seen and you've probably, I don't know, maybe played around with, but when you try to put it in on a track, it just can sometimes sound a little bit like a jumbled mess if you don't really know what's going on with it. So I'm here today to kind of demystify it and break it down and show you how you can use it in more creative and, I guess, educated ways where you'll make better decisions with it and you'll get things sounding much, much better. So the Beat Repeat audio effect can be found under, of course, your audio effects category. If you go to the delay and loop folder, you'll see it here. We're going to put it on the kick right now. Before I actually start playing around with the Beat Repeat, let me just show you what I've got here. I've got a little techno track that I started, a couple of different elements here. Let me just stop a few things. So this is kind of the meat of it. And then I've got this string sound, and then I think perhaps in our second video today we might play around with this vocal hit. This is just a recording from a vocalist friend of mine. She just did some oohs and ahs, and I sliced it up in a drum rack here, and I got a couple different patterns. We'll probably use this in the second video, like I said, to apply the Beat Repeat and make it sound a little bit more rhythmically cool. But for this first video, what we're going to do is just simply break down all of the parameters on the Beat Repeat, like exactly what is going on here. And then in the second video, we'll use it in some practical ways where we can, get some nice creative rhythmic results out of it. And the idea behind Beat Repeat is that it's essentially taking a piece of your audio, whatever audio you're running through it, and it kind of does this like real-time resampling of it and then stuttering of it. So it, there's lots of different ways that you can like apply different rhythms, or you can use it almost to generate like fills and things on certain drums, or you can just get like creative, just really weird textural kind of sounds out of it. So let's turn it on this kick. As you can see, I've got just this pretty straightforward 4 on the floor kick loop going on down here. So pretty much every quarter note, at the beginning of every quarter note, that's where we're going to hear the kick drum, right? Well, the first thing you'll want to look at on your Beat Repeat is this graphical grid along the top. This is kind of showing you a representation of 1 bar of musical time. And one thing that always kind of bothered me about the Beat Repeat is the way they number the different subdivisions of the bar. I really wish it wasn't numbered 0, 1, 2, 3. I wish it was numbered 1, 2, 3, and 4. But you can almost imagine like this is beat number 1. If you were to divide this into quarter notes, this would be beat number 1, beat number 2, beat number 3, beat number 4. So you can kind of ignore those numbers. They're a little bit misleading. But along the top here, this is showing us where the Beat Repeat is going to resample the audio from, and then where exactly it's going to kind of stutter it back and how many times and how long it's going to hold it out for. So if we're looking at this, if you kind of look carefully here, we're basically going to hear it repeat back the beginning portion of this first kick drum. It's going to repeat back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. And the speed of the repeats are going to essentially be 16th notes. So it's going to just kind of repeat a 16th note chunk of that sample. And I can tell that because of my grid size down here set to 16th notes. The amount of 16th notes that it's holding out for can be set by the gate. So if I increase that, you'll see we see more and more squares kind of fill out the bar. if we go, you know, really low with it, 1/16, we're literally just going to hear like 1/16 note slice of the kick drum just kind of play on top of the existing kick drum. So it probably won't be all that effective. Let's solo the kick. But as we turn the gate up, you'll start to hear the repeat. So I just set it back to its default value, which is 7/16 notes. Okay, so we're going to be obviously looking at these different controls, but you can always kind of look back up here as a visual guide to see what's going on with the beat repeat. So let's take a look here where we've got interval. This is essentially telling us how often the beat repeat is set to take effect. So the current interval is 1 bar. So essentially that means at the beginning of each bar, that's when it's going to kind of like prime itself and ready itself to go. So we can adjust this, of course. Now if we adjust this, you're going to see those numbers along the bottom change. So if I go to 2 bars, for example, this is now representing 2 bars of time. So you can see that my little 7/16 note stutter, that's only showing it over visually over a much smaller area of this grid. So just kind of keep that in mind. We're going to keep it at 1 bar for now, just because I think it's very easy to read up here. So again, this means that at the beginning of every 1 bar, that's when the beat repeat's going to kind of be like, okay, I'm ready. I'm going to start to repeat your audio. You just tell me when within this bar you want me to repeat it. And that's what the offset control is doing. So with the offset set at 0, that just means that at the very beginning of the bar, that's when the beat repeat is going to take effect. But let's say we had another kick drum that came in, I don't know, maybe right here, or maybe halfway through the first quarter note segment of time here, and we wanted the beat repeat to kick in there. What we'd have to do is use the offset to tell it that. So we can move the offset up by 2/16 notes or 4/16 notes, or however you want to move it. But you'll see visually that will tell us where the beat repeat is going to kick in and actually take effect. So it's going to begin its process again at the beginning of 1 bar, but we're telling it to offset itself so it doesn't actually kick the repeats in until, let's say, 2/16 notes later, right? So now with that setting, what we're actually hearing is, let me change my grid size here to 16th notes. So we're hearing the beat repeat kick in right here. So it's kind of resampling, like capturing the tail end of this kick and then just sort of repeating that 7 times. That's what we're hearing right now. So let's just take a listen. You just get this kind of rumble at the end as it just kind of plays back the tail of that kick. Now if we bring the offset back to 0, we're just hearing the beginning of that kick repeat 7 times, right? If we want to hear it more or less, we can adjust the gate. Now here's another really important thing about the beat repeat, if you want it to sound good in your music, is be aware of these different mix mode settings over here. You've got 3 different buttons that almost act sort of kind of like a dry wet control. So with the mix button enabled, which is the default setting, that means that when the beat repeat takes effect, when it plays back its resampled, its stuttered audio, it's mixing that on top of the dry audio. So you're just hearing both signals play together. And you can see it gets a little loud. It might be a little hard to read here, but my input signal is actually a little bit less than my output signal, which is kind of going into the yellow, almost into the red a little bit. That's because I got these 2 copies playing on top of each other. Now, if we flip over here to gate mode, that means that the beat repeat is going to ignore the dry signal. We won't hear the dry signal at all. It's just going to play the wet or the repeated signal. So we just hear those 7 little 16th note chunks of my kick drum and then nothing else, right? If we go back to mix mode, we'll hear both things play on top of each other. My preferred method of dry wet control, I guess we could call it, when I'm using beat repeat is to use this, which is called insert mode. This is going to sort of like toggle between the two. So when the dry signal is playing, we'll hear the dry signal just fine. But when the beat repeat kicks in and stutters the signal for us, it's going to temporarily mute the dry signal. So you just have one seamless signal. You don't have anything piling on top of each other. You don't have the dry just completely being ignored like you would in the gate mode. We have like an even blend between the two, and they're kind of like cutting in and out. When one plays, the other cuts out, and vice versa. So it just sounds nice and clean in my opinion. Okay, so again, mix, insert, and gate. I'm going to go with insert mode because I like that one. Okay, then we have grid. Grid is essentially telling the beat repeat the speed at which it's going to shoot out these repeats. So again, current setting is 16th notes. Hopefully we can all hear that. We can change this, of course. You can go all the way down to 1 bar, which in the case of our 1 bar kick drum loop, that's just sort of repeating. That's not really going to make all that much difference. Or you can go as fast as one 256th note, which almost turns it into like a buzzy oscillator kind of a sound. Okay, so this is the speed of the repeats, right? So let's say maybe I just want to do like a little kind of like flam or like a ghost hit with my kick. I could perhaps set my grid to, maybe let's go like 1/8. And then the gate, maybe we can turn the gate down so it doesn't hold the repeats and keep repeating them over and over again. Maybe we just do like 1/16th note or 2/16th notes, which would be about an eighth note. Or let's go a little bit longer. Let's go maybe 4. See how that sounds. So now it's kind of like I'm getting a doubling of that kick, right? Now both slices are the same volume. And if I wanted to create like a ghost note or a flam, I kind of want to turn the volume of the second one down. Well, that's what this decay control down here can be used for. So if we turn that up, you'll actually see that represented visually, hopefully. Well, not visually here, but if we increase the number of repeats with the gate, you'll kind of see each successive one dips in volume. Even though we're not seeing that visually here at my current setting, the second kick is still playing back at a quieter level. So each repeated signal decays in volume over time. As each one plays, it just gets quieter and quieter. So this is nice for little flams and things like that. Okay, let's turn the decay back down. Okay, let's talk here about variation. So what variation is going to do is this is going to randomly change the grid size. It's almost like you have a random or like a sample and hold LFO that's going to modulate the grid size. Now you won't actually see the grid size move, but it'll jump to different settings. So let's maybe start on 16th notes. Let's increase the gate a little bit. And with the variation set to 0, just we're always hearing 16th notes, right? If we start to turn the variation up, you notice at the beginning of each bar, when we're telling the beat repeat to kick in, the grid setting is changing. We're not always getting a 16th note repeat. We're getting different values. So the higher the variation number, you can almost think of it like an LFO's modulation depth. The more you turn this up, the greater it's moving the grid left and right. The greater it's kind of like picking between different values. It's going amongst a much larger range than if we had the variation at a smaller setting. It might only jump, I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 to the left or right. So the more variation you dial up, the more random this becomes. Now, if you want to add even more randomness to this, there are some interesting things you can do down here with this chooser menu. Right now it says trigger. What that means, this menu, by the way, has to do with the variation. It's directly tied to variation. So in trigger mode, which again, that's your default, that means that every time the beat repeat gets triggered, the variation is going to change. It'll just, pick a different variation amount for you. If you set it down here, though, we can change it between quarter note, eighth note, 16th notes. Let's say I choose eighth note. That means that every eighth note, whether or not the beat repeat is triggering or doing anything, every eighth note, this variation knob is changing to a different value. Okay? So it's almost like you have another random LFO modulating the variation, and the variation is like its own LFO that's modulating the grid at random as well. So it's like adding another layer of randomness. Every eighth note, it'll change this value, or every 16th note, it'll change this value, or every quarter note, it'll change this value, etc. And then the last option you have down here is auto, which means that it's just applying its own completely random LFO to the variation, where it's not going to change, regularly on regular intervals or whenever the beat repeat triggers. It's just straight up automatically just moving the variation wherever the heck it wants to at any given moment in time, and you can't predict that. So this is like the most random you can make the beat repeat. And as long as the variation isn't set to 0, this will be totally random. If this is set to 0, these are all kind of bypassed because we're telling it we just don't want any variation, right? So the variation has to be at least turned up to 1 or more in order to get these different re-trigger modes to operate. Okay. So what do we got? We covered interval, offset, grid, variation. We talked a bit about gate. We talked a bit about decay. Volume should be pretty self-explanatory, hopefully. This is just the volume of the output signal. Okay. Or the wet signal, you can think of it. And then over here we have chance. This is the percent chance that the repeat will occur based on our interval and offset. So again, we have interval set to 1 bar, offset set to 0. So at 100% chance, at the beginning of every single bar, the beat repeat is going to kick in. There's no doubt about it. But if we turn the chance down, we can again apply a little randomness to this. Let's go to 50%. Now there's a 50% chance the beat repeat's going to kick in and do its thing. There, it just did it. Or there's a 50% chance it's just not going to do anything and it's just going to play the dry signal as normal. Okay, so you can set a percent chance that you're going to hear it versus not hear it. Good if you want to just add a little randomization, if you want to have some random drum fills that come in, or flams, or ghost notes, or whatever. Let's set it back to 100. Now this is kind of interesting. Right above the chance control, you have a button that's just labeled repeat. And what this does is it kind of like bypasses your chance dial. So even if it's at 100% or 0%, doesn't really matter. It's going to bypass that. And it's just going to trigger the repeats whenever you hit that. This, I find, is a really great control to automate, especially if you want to customize the beat repeat and tell it to kick in at a specific moment in the arrangement. So let's set the chance to 0. Now it's going to sound like the beat repeat is just bypassed. Nothing's happening. But when I click it, it kicks in and then it's doing all its variation stuff here. Let's just make it a little bit more regular. So we'll turn variation down. Let's set the grid to 12th notes. Let's turn repeat off. So we're going to let it play. And then when I click this, it just captures whatever happened to be playing right when I clicked it, and it's going to continue to repeat that. And it'll repeat that forever until you turn the repeat button off again. Okay, so that's a nice way to just customize it and tell it exactly where you want it to hit. I didn't mention this over here, this no triplets. If that's on, the grid setting is going to ignore anything that's a triplet. So, you know, 3rd notes, 6th notes, 12th notes, anything that has intervals of 3, it's going to just ignore those. I usually like to leave those on though. So I'm going to turn the no triplet off. So if that is on though, and I set it to a value of 12th note, take a listen. Let's set the chance back up. It's actually just going off of 8th notes. So if I set it to 8th notes versus 12th, it's just ignoring the 12th and only playing 8th notes. If I go up to 16ths, we'll hear that. Okay, so you can just have it ignore triplets if you want to. And then down here, these are very interesting, these pitch controls. So we have just a straight up pitch control and then a pitch decay control. Let's talk about pitch first. So you can see I can set a pitch from 0 semitones all the way up to 12 semitones, or negative 12, I should say. It's going down. What that means is that each successive repeat after the first one is going to be pitched down by that amount. So let's take a listen to our kick. Let's go down kind of far with this. So you can hear the first one, same pitch, but those next 3 drop down by 7 semitones, which could be kind of a cool little, let's bring some of the other percussion in. Almost creates like a bass line. Okay. Then we've got pitch decay. Now, this is kind of an interesting one because what this is going to do is take each successive hit, each successive repeat, I should say, and it's going to pitch it down gradually. Almost like the decay was kind of changing the volume gradually. Pitch decay is going to pitch it down gradually. Let's solo just the kick so we can really focus on that. And the higher you set this, the lower it's going to bring the pitch down. The only downside to this control, and everybody always asks me about this, the only downside to this is that you can't specify exactly which pitches it's dropping to. It just kind of goes further. If you turn it up more, it doesn't drop down quite as far if you turn it up less, but you just got to kind of tune it in by ear if you're trying to hit it or have it land on specific pitches. So just be aware of that. If we turn up the gate so we hear more repeats, we're really going to hear that pitch down over time. Let's hear that with the percussion again. Again, kind of an interesting way to almost create a bass line from the kick. Let's turn that back. And then the last thing we've got here is a filter. So if I turn that on, it's just a fairly simple bandpass filter. We can set the cutoff frequency here and adjust the width from here. Once we play around with this on like the vocals or some of the other sounds, you'll be able to hear the filter a little bit better. And you can see when I high pass it, we really don't hear too much of the kick. It's a pretty low kick. But this is a way to filter the wet or the repeated signal if you are so inclined, if you so desire. Okay, so that is going to do it for video 1 here. Like I said, in the next video, we'll look at some more practical uses of this and how to get creative with it. But now that we know the controls, we are better equipped to get in there and really start to make this thing sound good. Okay, thanks for sticking with me. I know that first one was a bit of a doozy going through all those controls on the beat repeat. But now we'll look at some practical uses of beat repeat, some ways that we can utilize it in more creative ways or more practical ways. I'm going to start with this clap sound, actually, which is just a pretty straightforward 909 style clap sound, just hitting on beat 2 and beat 4 of every bar. Pretty boring right now. But let's use beat repeat to maybe add in some maybe random, maybe not so random flams or ghost hits of that clap and just make that pattern a little more interesting. So we're going to grab, again, our beat repeat from audio effects under delay and loop. Put it at the end of my signal path here. Now, again, the claps are hitting on beat 2 and beat 4 of each bar. So we might even be able to change our interval to a half bar because it's occurring every half bar, but we'll want to offset it to the second beat. Let me just turn the gate down relatively low here. Remember, the gate is how many repeats are going to occur. The grid is the speed of those repeats. Let's just make sure this sounds like, I should hear like 2 16th note repeats. Pretty much every clap, right? Yeah. But let's do this. Let's maybe turn the chance down so that it doesn't occur every single time. Maybe we'll go like, let's start at 50%. So every once in a while you'll get a doubling of the clap. And maybe we turn the decay down. So when those additional claps come in, they're kind of more like ghost notes. Let's also turn the insert mode on so we don't hear the two signals play on top of each other and kind of muddy each other up. We could also, if we wanted to, maybe filter the ghost notes out. Not too much. We could increase the gate if we want to hear more repeats. That's kind of cool. We could also turn variation up a bit so it randomizes and it's not just always playing on 16th notes. Let's hear it all together. I might turn the chance down a little bit more just so it doesn't happen so often. So now we just got like a little random kind of clap fill that comes in every once in a while. I like that. It doesn't last for too long, comes and goes when it needs to. Cool. Let's jump over here where I've got this chord stab, which is a pretty dry sound right now. And, you know, it's got a decent rhythm to it, how it's falling in with the drums and everything like that, but this is another thing that could be a little bit more interesting, I think, rhythmically. So again, we can use beat repeat to play around with that. So let's grab beat repeat and throw it in right after this chord stab sampler that I'm using. Let's take a look at where I'm looking at a 16th note grid. So I've got this one hitting like in the middle of the third beat, it looks like. So and I think this is the one that I want to affect because we got all this space. We could kind of utilize that and maybe fill in some repeats of this note here. So it's about in the middle of the third beat. So let's use the offset to set it around there. I'm going to, again, turn the gate down. I usually like to start with a lower gate setting so it's not like overlapping and just going crazy, just so we can hear and make sure we've dialed it into the right spot. Let's solo the sound. And it sounds like it's operating on the right hit there. Cool. Now you'll notice, you see how this little light next to the grid lights up in the second bar? This is a 2-bar long pattern. I don't have a note there, but that's just indicating, hey, if there was something there, I would repeat for you, bro. So just if you see that lighting up and you don't hear anything, that could be why. It could be maybe your pattern's a little longer and there's not a note in that specified place. Okay, so anyway, now that we've got that set up, we could perhaps use our decay again. Let's switch to insert mode so that sounds a little bit cleaner. We don't have the two signals playing on top of each other. Let's maybe try a different value here. Ooh, let's play it back again. Turn the gate up a little bit more. Keep the decay a little bit lower. I want to keep those similar volume. Try filtering them. What if we do like a triplet kind of thing, maybe a 12th note? Or a 6th note? Let's try that. I like 12th better. Let's hear how it sounds in context with everything. You know what, let's turn the decay down. Just keep it nice and loud. I might even turn the volume up. Remember, this is controlling the volume of the wet or the repeated signal. Open this filter up a bit more. Or maybe close it down a bit more. Kind of like that. Adds like a deep, repeated copy of the chord after. Again, let's maybe add some variation. Let's try doing that auto thing for the trigger mode. So it's kind of like random LFOing this variation, which is random LFOing the grid. So just get different rhythmic values coming in for that. Turn the gate down a little bit. Cool. Digging that. And then let's jump over here to this vocal. Let's just go to this. This is just repeating one hit every bar. Let's maybe make this clip a little bit longer because I got an idea for this one. So I'm going to go down to my clip view. You can see here that this is currently 1 bar long. I'm going to go here to the length settings for my loop. I'm going to increase the length. Let's make it kind of long. We'll make it about 8 bars long. So at the beginning of the first bar, we're going to have that hit, and then we just got a whole lot of nothing. But we're going to use beat repeat to fill that out. And you're probably thinking, 8 bars, that's crazy. How are you going to fill that out? That's going to get so just repetitive and weird. Well, let's maybe play around with some of those more advanced beat repeat settings, like maybe the pitch or the pitch decay or some of these other things. So we'll throw it onto our vocal hit. And let's see, where's that hit occurring? Let's zoom in on the first bar here. So that's about the middle of the second beat, so like 1.5 beats in. So we'll use our offset to identify that. It's going to be right about there. Let's just make sure. Okay, cool. Okay, now what I'm going to do here is actually turn the chance control all the way down. And we'll just use the repeat function to kind of toggle the effect on when we want to hear it, and then toggle it off when we don't want to hear it. So let's just play a little bit of the song. So I just toggled it on like part way through. There's a reverb on this this vocal slice. I toggled it in part way through, and we're just like kind of hearing this repeated version of that reverb tail. You could filter that. Back off. Let's switch to insert mode again. I like using insert mode just to keep it clean. Whoops. You could filter, you could automate this filter. But we're just creating now this texture. Let's reset these settings. We're just creating this texture out of that one hit, just repeating in different ways. So let's keep playing around with this. I'm just going to dial some different settings in and see what I like, and then maybe we'll draw in some automation for this repeat as well. like that. Turn the filter off for a minute. Let's try adjusting the pitch. Let's go to -7. That'll drop it by a perfect fifth. Notice that as that repeat continues to play, I can change this pitch. You could automate that and almost make a melody out of it if you wanted to. But let's, instead of just doing like this static pitch control, what about pitch decay? Remember, the higher we turn this, the more each successive pitch is, or each successive repeat, I should say, is going to pitch down. But because we're just kind of triggering the repeat and leaving it on, this could conceivably go on forever, this dropping of this pitch. But let's see how we can get this to sound. Turn the volume of the wet signal up just so you can really hear it. I'll solo it too. Oh, let's trigger our repeat on. So that's essentially what we're going to have going on in the background. I might reduce the pitch decay amount because it's going to go on for a long time, and we'll automate this too, because I'm going to have it go on for a long time. We'll have it just decrease in pitch a little bit more gradually with a lower value, whereas if I turn the value up, it's really going to drop the pitch down super low to a point where it's going to be really hard to hear pretty quickly because it's going to be pretty much below the range of human hearing. So again, chances at 0. Let's get into that clip. And let's automate that repeat setting. I'll just use a clip envelope to do that. So I can right click on my repeat button and select show automation. I've got the automation currently telling it to be off. Let's have it turn on, maybe right on that note. So I'll just switch to my pencil tool and delete that breakpoint. And then it's just gonna stay on for those 8 bars. Let's just make sure this is working all right. And then with that. All right, let's see how it sounds in context with everything. Play around with that filter. We could automate that if we wanted to. Another thing we could try here is using these different retrigger timings. Maybe we'll do like quarter notes, and I'll turn the variation up a little bit. Just go kind of low to 2. But remember, what this is going to do is it's going to change the position of the variation every quarter note, essentially. Not the results I was hoping for, but the intention was there. Let's see if we do something. Let's try auto. Let's just see. That's kind of bizarre and weird. Yeah, it's a little too random to the point where rhythmically it's just not working for me anymore, but definitely play around with those. But I like this kind of pitch decay thing we've got going on here. Now, unfortunately, there's not a way to tell it to pitch back up. But what you could always do is resample this pitching way down for 8 bars and then copy it and reverse it, and then it's going to kind of pitch back up for 8 bars. Just some food for thought there. But anyway, I don't want this video to go on for too much longer, but I hope you're starting to get some ideas for how you can get into the beat repeat and really start using it in more creative ways to, either make certain rhythmic patterns a little bit more interesting or create certain, flams or ghost notes on different percussion parts. Or just using it, running vocals or whatever other sounds through it just to create unique textures with some of the repitching options here, some of the random grid changes with the variation and stuff like that. So as always, I hope this has been helpful and you've learned something new. I hope you kind of see some of these audio effects that maybe have been sitting in your core Ableton library for a long time. You see them in a new light and get some new ideas for how to utilize them. And I will catch everybody on another Sonic Academy tutorial very soon. Take care, everybody.
Thanks everyone for watching. We really appreciate all the support from you guys. If you love this video, then smash a like, and if you want to be notified about new videos, hit the subscribe and notification buttons. Peace!